The lecture hall was not quiet. Alien voices filled the room, each different, some sharp, some deep, some almost musical. The Galactic Academy classroom was always noisy before the teacher arrived. A group of insectoid students clicked their mandibles in rhythm, while two tall, crystal-skinned beings argued over who had the sharper mind. It was an ordinary day in the greatest school of the Orion Arm. Or at least, it seemed so. The wide doors at the back slid open. The sound died at once. Professor Ardek entered. He was old, his scales faded from bright green to a dull gray. His 3 eyes were sharp, scanning the hall with a weight that silenced even the most restless student. Everyone respected him. He had taught strategy, history, and interstellar law for more than 2 centuries. Yet today, something was different. His face was serious, almost heavy. Even the flicker of humor that sometimes lived in his voice was gone. Without a word, he walked to the front. The glowing wallboard lit up as he touched it. Slowly, he raised one claw and wrote 4 letters in bold, white script. HUMANS. For a few seconds, silence held the room. Students leaned forward, confused. Then the whispers began. Humans! A soft-voiced aquatic student bubbled from her seat in the back. Did he write the wrong name? A scaled warrior hissed. One insectoid clicked his mandibles in mock laughter. Humans! The weak ones? The little mammals who cannot even travel far without help. A ripple of nervous laughter spread. Some shook their heads. Some smirked. Professor Ardek turned slowly, facing them. His 3 eyes narrowed. His voice was calm but heavy. You laugh now. You should not. The classroom fell silent again. Ardek's claws tapped the desk once, a sound like a hammer. Today's lecture is not about numbers. Not about fleets. It is about a secret. A truth that many of you will not believe. But you must listen, because if you do not, one day you may find yourself standing in front of a human. And that day will decide if you live or die. The silence grew heavier. Even the air seemed thicker. A young crystal-skinned student raised his hand, glowing faintly. But, Professor, humans are weak, are they not? Their planet is small, their bodies fragile. Their lifespans short, another student interrupted. Barely 100 years at most. How can such a species be dangerous? The professor's eyes hardened. Because you measure power the wrong way. The words echoed. He turned back to the board and tapped the letters again. Humans are the only species banned from the Galactic War Council. They are the only ones written into the Accord of Silence. Do you even know why? No one spoke. The insectoid who laughed earlier clicked nervously. Because they are too weak to fight? Professor Ardek's voice grew sharper. No. Because they are too dangerous to fight. The classroom shifted. Some leaned back, some leaned forward. All eyes fixed on him. He began to walk slowly across the front of the room, his voice steady. You sit here, young minds of the galaxy, learning history, learning tactics. You believe the strongest species are the ones with the largest fleets, the most advanced weapons, the longest lives. You believe wars are won with numbers and logic. But humans, he paused, his 3 eyes gleaming. Humans do not fight with logic alone. They fight with something else. Something we still do not fully understand. He lifted a claw and tapped the side of his head. They are unpredictable. The insectoid shifted uneasily. The aquatic student tilted her head, bubbles escaping from her gills. Ardek's voice dropped, softer now, forcing the class to lean in. Listen well. When a human is pushed to battle, when a human sees no way out, they do not retreat. They do not surrender. They change the rules. They create paths no one else can see. And in doing so, they destroy enemies far stronger than themselves. The words carried weight. A tall scaled warrior scoffed, though softer now. But Professor, one human ship cannot defeat an armada. That is impossible. Ardek's eyes locked on him. Impossible? Then perhaps you have not read about the Battle of Ashara's Belt. The class stirred. Many shook their heads. Some whispered, confused. The professor continued. One human vessel. One small corvette. Old, damaged, with a crew of barely 50. Against an armada of the Threxian Empire. 70 ships. Warships, destroyers, carriers. Do you know what happened? No one spoke. The professor leaned forward, claws gripping the edge of the desk. His voice was low, almost a growl. The humans won. Gasps filled the room. That is a lie, one student burst out. 70 against 1? No species could. Yet it happened. Ardek cut him off sharply. I have studied the records. The Threxians themselves sealed the files, ashamed. That human ship used tactics so reckless, so strange, that no computer could predict it. They used asteroids as weapons. They turned their own broken engines into traps. They fought like beings with nothing to lose. And in the end, the armada was destroyed. The classroom was frozen. Ardek's claws tapped again, steady like a heartbeat. That is why humans are dangerous. Not because of their strength. Not because of their numbers. But because when all logic says they should lose, they find a way to win. A hush lingered. No one dared laugh now. The aquatic student whispered, voice trembling. Then, why do they not rule us all? Ardek's 3 eyes turned to her. His voice was softer, almost sorrowful. Because they do not know what they are. The words hung in the air like a shadow. Students exchanged glances. Some frowned, some shifted uncomfortably, some stared at the word on the board as if it were a threat. The insectoid finally clicked again, slower this time. Professor, if all this is true, why teach us? Why reveal this secret? Ardek looked across the room, his gaze heavy, his scales dim in the light. Because someday, despite the Council's ban, despite all the laws, humans will find their way back into war. And when they do, you must remember this lesson. You must remember the silence that filled this classroom today. Because one day, it may save your life. No one moved. No one breathed. The word on the board glowed brighter in the silence. Humans. And for the first time, the young aliens in that room felt a shadow of fear for a species they had once mocked. The classroom was still heavy with silence after the professor's last words. The word humans glowed on the wallboard like a warning sign. No student dared laugh now. No one mocked. They only waited. Professor Ardek stood tall, his scales dim under the white glow. His 3 eyes scanned the room slowly, making sure every mind was still. Then he spoke again, his voice calm but sharp. You think you understand strength. You measure it in fleets, in weapons, in how long your species lives. But humans, they do not fit those numbers. They break every rule. He paused, letting the words settle. A young avian student, feathers twitching nervously, raised a wing. Professor, if humans are so dangerous, then explain. How can a species so small, so short-lived, truly threaten the great powers of the galaxy? The professor's lips pulled back in a slow smile, but it was not warm. Good question. Listen well. He turned back to the glowing word and tapped it with one claw. Humans are dangerous for 3 reasons. The first, their desperation. The second, their creativity. The third, their will to fight for each other. These 3 things make them more fearsome than fleets 100 times their size. The students leaned in, curiosity stronger than their fear now. Ardek began to pace the room, his voice steady, like he was retelling a nightmare. Let us start with desperation. Most of you come from long-lived species. Centuries. Millennia. You do not rush. You do not panic. You do not burn your lives away in one short fight. But humans, they live barely 100 years. To them, every moment matters. Every choice feels urgent. So when they fight, They fight as though there is no tomorrow, because for them, tomorrow is never guaranteed. The aquatic student whispered softly, bubbles slipping past her gills. So, they burn brighter, because their lives are short? The professor nodded slowly. Yes. And that fire makes them terrifying. I once read a record of a human squad stranded on an ice world. Their ship destroyed, no hope of rescue. Do you know what they did? No one answered. They fought anyway. They turned the broken pieces of their ship into weapons. They used fire against predators that no other species could face. They should have died in days. But they lasted months. When rescue finally came, those humans were half frozen, starving, and still standing. A murmur spread through the class. The insectoid clicked nervously, mandibles twitching. But why? Why not give up if survival is impossible? The professor's gaze sharpened. Because humans do not give up. That is their desperation. That is their curse, and their strength. He let the silence rest for a breath before continuing. Now, creativity. This is the second reason they are feared. He tapped his head again, eyes glowing faintly. Most species follow patterns. Our minds are logical, predictable. That is why computers can simulate battles, why strategies repeat across centuries. But humans, he shook his head slowly. Humans break patterns. They invent new ways, even in the middle of battle. The crystal-skinned student leaned forward, his body glowing faintly with interest. You mean, improvisation? Yes. Improvisation. Creativity. Madness. The professor's voice grew harder. Call it what you will, but it makes them deadly. I studied the siege of Corin IV. 1,000 human soldiers against 10,000 enemies. They should have been crushed in hours. Instead, they turned their enemies' weapons against them. They dug tunnels through the city ruins, striking from shadows, moving like ghosts. Every time the enemy adapted, the humans changed again. By the end, the attackers fled, leaving behind twice the dead they had expected. The scaled warrior shook his head, frowning. But no species can adapt that fast. It takes planning, training, order. Ardek cut him off with a sharp laugh. That is the difference. Humans thrive in chaos. Where you see disorder, they see opportunity. Where you see a trap, they see a weapon. Where you see defeat, they see one last chance. And they take it. Always. The words echoed like a challenge in the air. For a moment, the students sat frozen, minds racing with images of small, fragile humans twisting battles upside down. The insectoid clicked again, softer this time. Desperation. Creativity. But Professor, you said there was a third reason. Ardek stopped pacing. His face grew heavier, more solemn. Yes. The third reason. The most dangerous of all. The room felt colder. Even the lights seemed dimmer as his voice dropped to almost a whisper. Humans fight for each other. The words seemed simple, almost harmless. Yet they carried weight. The avian tilted his head. Many species fight for empire, for honor, for their leaders. Is that not the same? The professor shook his head slowly. No, it is not the same. Humans do not fight only for empire or law. They fight for bonds. For people they love. For friends. For family. For comrades beside them. They will fight to the death, not for themselves, but for someone else. He paused, his voice hardening. I once read of a human soldier who carried his wounded comrade across a battlefield of fire. His armor was broken, his body already failing. He could have escaped alone. But he refused. He carried his friend until the last breath. Both died in the flames. But do you know what happened? No one spoke. Their squad saw it. They saw his sacrifice. And in rage, in grief, they fought like demons. They broke through enemy lines, outnumbered and broken, and won. Gasps rippled through the class. Ardek's eyes scanned them slowly, his voice low but strong. This is why humans are feared. You cannot predict such loyalty. You cannot calculate such sacrifice. No empire can train soldiers to fight with hearts that burn like that. It is beyond logic. Beyond reason. It is human. The classroom was silent again. No one mocked. No one doubted. They only stared, the weight of the words pressing into their minds. The aquatic student's voice trembled. Then, Professor, if humans fight like this, what would happen if an entire army of them entered a galactic war? The professor's gaze darkened. That is why they are banned. That is why the council forbids them from joining our wars. Because if humans ever fought together, united under one cause, he let the silence stretch, his eyes cold as stone. They would burn the galaxy to ash. The words struck like a thunderclap. Some students shivered. Some looked away. Others stared at the board, the glowing word humans now a symbol of dread. The insectoid whispered softly, almost to himself. Then, maybe it is better that they never learn what they are capable of. The professor's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, a flicker of something else. Fear, perhaps, moved across his face. Pray that they never do. The classroom was silent once more. And in that silence, every young alien began to wonder, if the humans were so dangerous, where were they now? The word humans still glowed on the board, bright and sharp, like it was carved into the minds of every student. The lecture hall was silent, heavy with thought. No one dared to whisper now. No one dared to laugh. Professor Ardek stood at the front, still as a stone statue. His 3 eyes scanned the room, watching every nervous face. Slowly, he lifted one claw and pointed at the glowing word. You now understand their desperation. You now understand their creativity. But that is not the full truth. No. The greatest danger of humans is not in how they fight alone. It is in how they fight together. His voice grew softer, but stronger at the same time, as though each word carried the weight of a warning carved into history. This, young ones, is the secret weapon of humanity. Their bond. Their strange ability to connect with one another in ways the galaxy still cannot explain. The students shifted in their seats. Some leaned closer, eager. Others looked uneasy, their minds already troubled by what they had heard in the earlier lessons. A crystal-skinned student raised his hand, his glowing body flickering nervously. Professor, you speak of bonds. But many species have bonds. The hive of the Insecca. The clans of the Volri. Even our people fight for unity. How are humans different? Ardek's gaze settled on him. Slowly, he shook his head. No. You do not understand. Your bonds are simple. They are written in your biology, your culture, your long traditions. The Insecca fight because they are born into one hive mind. The Volri fight because their clans demand it. These are chains. Chains of blood. Chains of biology. Chains of culture. He turned back to the glowing word on the board. His voice deepened. Humans make chains of choice. The classroom grew still again. Do you see? Humans are not forced to fight for each other. They choose to. Their families, their friendships, their comrades, they are not bound by instinct. They are bound by decision. By loyalty. By something invisible. And when they make that choice, he paused, eyes flashing cold. They fight with a fire no empire can match. The aquatic student let out a soft gasp, bubbles floating from her gills. You mean, they fight for things beyond law or biology? Yes. Ardek's voice sharpened. They fight for love. For friendship. For loyalty. For promises. Even for strangers. They fight not because they are told to, but because they want to. And that, young ones, is the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. The insectoid student clicked his mandibles nervously. But Professor, how can such a thing be a weapon? It is not a blade. It is not a fleet. How can feelings win wars? The professor's mouth pulled into something between a grimace and a smile. Ah, that is where you are wrong. Let me tell you a story. The classroom leaned forward as one. Even those who doubted were caught now, held by the sharp edge of the professor's tone. There was a battle, long ago. The siege of Darien. Some of you may have read the official records. But the truth is buried, hidden, because it was too dangerous to share. His claws tapped the desk slowly, like a drumbeat. Darien was a colony. A human colony. Not a great city. Not a powerful world. Just farmers, miners, families. The Threxian Empire came to take it. They brought a fleet. Warships. Soldiers. A force so large the colony had no chance. A murmur moved through the class. Everyone knew what that meant. Ardek's voice grew colder. The council expected surrender. The humans should have laid down their weapons. They should have fled. But they did not. They fought. Men, women, even children. They took hunting rifles, mining drills, farming tools, and they stood against trained soldiers with plasma weapons. Gasps filled the air. They fought for their homes. For their families. For people they loved. Do you know what happened? No one spoke. The Threxians lost. An empire lost. To farmers and miners. Because those humans refused to break. They fought for each other, for every neighbor, every family. Their bonds made them stronger than any army. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Finally, the avian student whispered, feathers trembling. But, Professor, even if they won, they must have lost many lives. Ardek nodded slowly, his voice almost solemn now. Yes, they lost many. But that is the final truth about their bonds. To humans, death is not an end if it protects the ones they care for. They will sacrifice themselves, burn themselves away, if it means those bonds survive. And that sacrifice inspires the ones who remain. It spreads like fire. It cannot be stopped. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. The crystal-skinned student whispered faintly. So, their secret weapon is not a machine. Not a fleet. It is each other. The professor's 3 eyes locked on him, and he nodded once. Yes. That is the secret the galaxy fears. That is the truth that keeps them banned from war. Humanity's greatest weapon is not their ships, not their guns, but the invisible threads that bind them together. He turned slowly, writing another word under humans on the board. The letters glowed bright. Bond. He pointed at it, his voice rising like a final judgment. Remember this. When all weapons fail, when all strategies collapse, when death surrounds them, humans will fight on. Not for empire. Not for logic. Not for orders. But for bonds. That is why even the strongest empires fear them. That is why the galaxy keeps them out of its wars. Because if humans ever united fully under that bond, nothing could stop them. The classroom was utterly silent now. Not even the faintest whisper. Every student sat frozen, eyes wide, hearts beating faster. The insectoid student, once mocking, finally spoke, his mandibles clicking nervously. Then, Professor, if this is true, why have we never seen such wars? Why have we never seen humans rise like this? Ardek's gaze darkened, his voice low and dangerous. Because humans themselves do not yet understand what they are. They live their short lives, working, dreaming, laughing, never knowing the galaxy fears them. But the day they realize it. He paused, his voice almost a growl. That day will be the galaxy's last. The word bond glowed under humans. The classroom sat frozen in dread, the truth heavy in every mind. And for the first time, the young aliens wondered, what would happen if humans ever discovered the weapon hidden in their own hearts? The classroom remained silent after Professor Ardek's words. Humans and bond glowed ominously on the board, reflecting off the faces of the students. No one moved. No one breathed loudly. Even the sound of mechanical pens or claws scratching against desks seemed to vanish. For many, the weight of what they had learned pressed down like an invisible hand. The truth about humans was heavier than any story, sharper than any blade. These creatures, small, fragile, short-lived, carried a secret weapon no species had ever possessed. The insectoid who had mocked humans earlier shifted nervously. His mandibles clicked softly, not in laughter, but in discomfort. He glanced around, as if asking himself whether anyone else felt the same fear. Finally, a student spoke. It was a young avian with pale blue feathers, trembling slightly. "Professor, if humans are so powerful, why don't we see them ruling the galaxy? Why haven't they already conquered worlds? Why haven't they overthrown empires?" The question hung in the air. Silence stretched. Even the buzzing of distant machines seemed muted. The professor's 3 eyes fixed on the student, heavy and unblinking. "This is the question many young minds ask," Ardek said softly, pacing slowly. "And the answer is both simple and terrifying." The classroom leaned in, hanging on every word. Even those who doubted humans now waited, fearful of what they might hear next. "Humans do not yet understand themselves," Ardek began. "They live ordinary lives, thinking about their families, their work, their small pleasures. They do not know the power of their bonds. They do not know the power of their desperation or creativity. And because of this, they do not fight at the scale we fear." A crystal-skinned student tilted his head. "So, if they knew, they could take over the galaxy?" Ardek stopped pacing. His gaze fixed on the glowing words on the board, humans and bond. His voice dropped, almost a whisper, but it carried like a warning. Yes. If humans truly understood the force within themselves, if they united in purpose, with no fear, no hesitation, nothing in the galaxy could stop them. Entire fleets would fall. Empires would crumble. Planets would burn. And all because of a simple truth: humans fight not just for survival, they fight for each other. The students shivered. The avian's feathers ruffled nervously, the aquatic student's gills pulsed faster, and even the insectoid's mandibles clicked against each other in unease. "Imagine," Ardek continued, "a battlefield filled with humans, each willing to die for the others. Each one refusing to surrender. Each one using every scrap of creativity, every last bit of strength, every ounce of desperation, not to win for themselves, but for their friends. That is a force no species has ever faced. That is a weapon the galaxy cannot calculate." A murmur ran through the class. Some students whispered softly to each other, imagining humans like legends from old stories, creatures who defied every expectation, creatures who could destroy empires with sheer will. The professor's voice grew sharper, cutting through the whispers. "You must understand, young ones, humans do not wage war like other species. They do not fight for conquest, for honor, or for law. They fight for bonds. And bonds are unbreakable, invisible, unstoppable. That is why humans are banned from the Galactic Council's wars. That is why no species dares to provoke them. That is why every empire fears even the thought of a human army, though they do not know it yet." The classroom fell silent again. The students stared at the glowing words on the board as though hypnotized. The weight of the truth pressed down on them like gravity. A hand rose slowly. It belonged to a small, quiet student sitting in the corner. His scales were pale, and his voice shook as he spoke. "Professor, if humans are so dangerous, why doesn't the galaxy stop them now? Why doesn't someone keep them in check?" Ardek's eyes darkened. His voice became low, almost a growl. "Because you cannot stop what does not yet understand itself. The galaxy cannot fight a species that does not know its full power. Humans live their short lives unaware of the danger they carry. They work, they laugh, they struggle, never realizing that their bonds, their will, and their creativity make them the most dangerous creatures in existence." The avian student tilted his head. "So, humans are like sleeping giants?" "Yes," Ardek said, nodding slowly. Sleeping giants who could awaken and shake the galaxy to its core. That is why they are watched. That is why the Council forbids their participation in galactic wars. That is why every species fears the day humans realize their true potential. The crystal-skinned student whispered, barely audible. But, Professor, if humans never know, then they cannot be stopped. They could rise at any moment, without warning. Ardek's 3 eyes glimmered in the dim light. Exactly. And that is why you must remember what you learn here today. Remember that humans are not weak. Remember that they fight for bonds. Remember that they are unpredictable, desperate, and creative. And above all, remember that one day, humans may awaken. And if they do, no one, no empire, no species will survive the storm they bring. The classroom was deathly quiet. No student moved. No one whispered. The air was thick with fear and awe. The glowing letters on the board seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Humans. Bond. Finally, the insectoid student who had mocked humans before spoke again, his mandibles clicking nervously. Professor, do we even stand a chance if humans awaken fully? Ardek's voice was grim. No. That is why the galaxy forbids them from war. That is why humans are watched, hidden, controlled, and yet free. They are kept small, ignorant of their own power. And yet, they are still humans. And humans cannot be stopped by fear alone. The students sat frozen. Their minds raced with images of humans in battle. Desperate, unpredictable, fighting not for conquest, but for each other. Entire fleets crushed. Empires broken. Worlds destroyed. All by creatures they had once thought weak. The young avian student whispered, almost to himself. Then, maybe it is better that humans never realize what they are. Ardek's eyes hardened. Perhaps. But someday, they will. A silence fell over the classroom that felt heavier than a star's core. Even the soft hum of the lights seemed muted. Every student felt it. The shadow of humans loomed over the galaxy, even in a room on a quiet teaching station far from any war. Then, Ardek's voice broke the stillness. And that, young ones, is why the galaxy fears humans. Not for what they have done, but for what they could do. One day, the Council may regret every decision they have made. One day, humans may awaken. And one day, the galaxy may not survive the storm. The classroom remained silent. Students stared at the glowing words, at the teacher, at each other. The weight of what they had learned pressed down like gravity. And in that silence, fear and awe mingled together. The insectoid clicked one last time, mandibles trembling. Then, we are truly powerless. Nothing can stop them. Nothing. Professor Ardek nodded. His eyes glimmered with something more than warning, something darker, almost sorrowful. Yes, he said softly. Nothing. Humans are the one species the galaxy cannot predict, cannot control, cannot defeat, and cannot ignore. That is the lesson for today. Never underestimate them. Never mock them. And above all, never provoke them. The students sat in stunned silence. Their minds swirled with images of humans as legends, humans as monsters, humans as gods in flesh. They had begun the lecture thinking humans were weak. Now, they understood the truth. Humans were the galaxy's secret storm. And one day, that storm would awaken. The classroom was quiet, almost unnaturally so. Humans and bonds still glowed on the board, casting long, flickering shadows across the faces of the students. The young aliens sat frozen, their minds heavy with the weight of what they had learned over the last hours. Even the hum of the lights seemed to fade into nothing. Professor Ardek stood at the front, his claws resting lightly on the desk. His 3 eyes were steady, unblinking, scanning the room. His voice, when it came, was calm, but it carried a gravity that silenced every whisper before it even formed. You have heard the lessons. You have learned the truth about humans. You have seen their desperation, their creativity, their bonds. And now, you must understand. The final truth. The students leaned forward slightly, instinctively sensing the weight of what was coming. Even the insectoid, who had mocked humans in the past, shifted nervously, clicking his mandibles in soft agitation. Humans are unpredictable. Humans are unstoppable when united. Humans fight not for empire, not for conquest, not for honor, but for each other. That is their secret weapon. That is what makes them dangerous. And that is why you, and the galaxy, must never provoke them. A crystal-skinned student raised a glowing hand slowly. Professor, you say humans are so dangerous, but if we never see them in war, if they are forbidden, how do we know this is true? How do we know they could really threaten the galaxy? Ardek's eyes glimmered with something darker than warning. Because I have seen the records. I have studied the battles. Not the official reports. The hidden accounts. The stories buried so deep that no empire dares to repeat them. And in every case, humans won. Against impossible odds. Against superior forces. Against the strongest weapons we have in the galaxy. The classroom grew colder. Students shivered, some gripping their desks. The thought of humans as a force no empire could defeat filled their minds with fear. The galaxy keeps them out of war, Ardek continued, pacing slowly. They are watched, limited, hidden. The Council fears them. Empires fear them. And yet, humans continue their lives, unaware. They build their homes, they raise their families, they live their short lives without knowing the storm they carry within them. A pale avian student whispered, feathers trembling. Then, if they ever realize, if they ever awaken, nothing could stop them? Ardek's voice dropped to a whisper that cut through the silence like a blade. Nothing. Nothing. Nothing can stop them if they awaken fully. That is why every species, every empire, every council, keeps them distant. That is why humans are forbidden in wars. That is why the galaxy fears the day humans truly know what they are capable of. The students sat frozen, imagining humans on battlefields, small, fragile bodies, yet unstoppable, fighting not for glory, but for each other. The thought was terrifying. And yet, it fascinated them. The insectoid spoke again, mandibles trembling. Professor, if humans fight for bonds, then what happens to the galaxy if they are forced into a war? What if they are pushed too far? Ardek's 3 eyes glimmered with a cold light. Then, the galaxy itself will tremble. Fleets will burn. Worlds will fall. And empires will crumble. Not because of machines, not because of strategy, not because of power, but because humans fight with something every other species cannot replicate. Their heart, their loyalty, their will, their bonds. A murmur ran through the class. Students imagined humans fighting, side by side, refusing to surrender, refusing to yield. Even if death awaited them at every step, even if every chance of victory was gone, they would not stop. They would fight for each other until the last breath. The crystal-skinned student whispered, almost to himself. Then, humans are gods in flesh. A storm that no one can survive. Ardek nodded slowly. Exactly. And that is the lesson you must carry with you. Never underestimate them. Never provoke them. And never assume they are weak. Even a single human, desperate and creative, fighting for someone they care about, can destroy what empires have spent centuries building. He walked to the board and tapped the glowing letters lightly. Humans. Bond. Remember these words. Etch them into your mind. If you ever face a human in conflict, do not fight. Do not challenge. Do not make them your enemy. Because when a human fights with nothing left to lose, the galaxy itself trembles. The classroom remained silent. The students could feel it. A storm lay hidden, somewhere in the galaxy, waiting. Waiting for humans to realize what they truly were. And when that day came, nothing could stand in their way. A pale avian student spoke softly, almost fearfully. Professor, what if humans never realize? What if they never awaken? Ardek's eyes softened for a moment. Then the galaxy is safe, for now. But no species can predict the day they will awaken. And the day they do, you will remember this lesson. The insectoid student whispered, mandibles clicking slowly. So, we live in fear of something that doesn't even know it exists? Yes, Ardek said, his voice low and solemn. We live in fear of the unknown. But the unknown carries truth. And humans are the greatest unknown the galaxy has ever faced. They are the storm that sleeps quietly, waiting to rise. And no one, not even the greatest empire, can predict when it will awaken. The students sat frozen. The classroom was heavy with thought, with fear, with awe. Every mind turned inward, imagining the humans they had dismissed as weak, now revealed as something beyond calculation, beyond prediction, beyond control. Professor Ardek's claws tapped lightly on the desk. This is your warning. Remember it. Tell it to no one outside this room. Humans are small. Humans are fragile. Humans seem ordinary. But in truth, they are the galaxy's secret weapon. And one day, they will awaken. A young crystal-skinned student finally whispered, and when they do, the galaxy will burn? Ardek's voice was cold, steady, and unyielding. Yes, and it will burn not because of machines or fleets, but because humans fight for what others cannot understand. Because they fight for each other. And because they will not stop until victory is theirs, or until nothing remains. The glow of the board seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Humans. Bond. Every student in the room felt it, a shadow of dread and awe settling over them. The avian students' feathers shivered. Then, perhaps it is better that humans never realize their power. Ardek's gaze hardened. Perhaps. But someday, they will. And when they do, you will remember today. You will remember the words written in this classroom. You will remember the lesson of humans. And you will hope that the storm waits a little longer before it rises. The insectoid clicked his mandibles one last time, quieter now, a soft echo of fear. Then, we are powerless. Nothing can stop them. Nothing. Ardek nodded slowly, his 3 eyes dark and unblinking. Yes, that is the truth. Humans are unpredictable. Humans are unstoppable. Humans fight for bonds that no empire can break. And humans cannot be defeated when they awaken fully. That is why the galaxy fears them. That is why you must never forget them. The classroom remained silent. Every student stared at the board, at the teacher, at each other. The weight of the lesson pressed down like gravity. They had begun this class thinking humans were weak. Now, they understood. Humans were the storm, the secret weapon, the force no species could ever predict or control. Professor Ardek stepped back, letting the glow of the board fill the room. His voice dropped one final time. And that, young ones, is your final warning. One day, the galaxy may tremble. One day, humans may awaken. And one day, you will know what fear truly means. The lights flickered, shadows danced across the walls. The words on the board pulsed once more. Humans. Bond. And in that classroom, far from the battles and empires of the galaxy, every student felt it. A storm was coming. A storm that slept quietly, but would rise. And the galaxy would never be the same.